My way of thinking didn't change until I realized that I wasn't broken, I wasn't unlucky, or that I wasn't living a good life. Until I realized that the story I've been telling myself was written by someone else, and it was completely wrong. I've tried so many times to change my mindset, to try to be more positive. I would do all the things they would recommend, and I would just end up feeling fake. I knew I wasn't a positive person. I knew I wasn't the bubbly girl, and it just felt like I was performing because the person I was trying to be didn't match the narrative, and it just couldn't work no matter how hard I try. Because the way that I was trying to change was just overly complicated, and I couldn't make it work. So here's the easy way to find out how you can start this journey. We have to ask ourselves, what is our story? And as we go through the chapters, you have to ask, who wrote this one? And we'll realize too that a lot of these chapters are co-written by a very special author. And that person is us, even though those chapters can be completely wrong. The idea of rewriting your own story is something that's near and dear to my heart because of my own personal experiences. Growing up, I didn't really have my father, and my mother had to work to provide for her 3 children. And being the youngest, I always lost the battle of whose friend is whose. And even with my family, my uncles and aunts always had their favorites, and unfortunately, I was never the one. So with the strong desire of always wanting to be selected, I ended up being a people pleaser, but also knowing to tiptoe around certain topics or certain things so that I wouldn't anger people, or hopefully make them so happy or pleased with me that maybe one day they would select me as their favorite. So growing up this way, I always had the understanding that I would be left behind, or that I would always be alone. And this continued for years until I realized that this was a life that I didn't want anymore. There were certain things that would happen where I would just feel the strong urge to rebel. And I realized that these are 2 different personalities that were conflicting with each other. Me constantly trying to hide my true self, and my true self trying to fight and be embraced by the light. This conflict can be incredibly destructive. The fight between the person that you think you should be and the person that you truly are. And after having kids, I think I really had the opportunity to relive my childhood. And there were a lot of situations that were just triggering. And I figured this was the perfect opportunity for me to grow and work on myself, improve my life, but also for the life of my kids too. Because I just want to live a life that I'm proud of, removing the variables of money, traveling, or whatever accolades that people try to build up to say that they have a happy life. So why do I keep saying these chapters were written incorrectly? Well, think about it as reading the headline. You read it and then you start to take your own personal experiences and you try to give an overall summary of what you think that story will say. Until you start to read into the details and you find out that the way that you interpreted the story is a complete 180 of what really happened. Your perception shifted. And that's why context is so important. In our own personal stories, there might have been information that we left out, that we interpreted incorrectly or assumed, which can completely change the way our story is interpreted. So when we have this narrative that we're this type of person or that we need to live this type of life, it's hard to be anything other than that. For years, I told myself that I was destined to be alone, that I didn't deserve love, or that I had to live an unhappy life. That was my storyline, and everything that I did reflected that. We've told ourselves a story for years, and it's just constantly playing on repeat, orchestrating every action that we make in our lives. If we want to change, we have to change the storyline. Change the characteristics, the habits, the traits, the actions that the main character, you, will take. And instead of being a bystander, a victim, or an extra on the set, we are going to be the director, the main character, the special effects, the lighting, the writer of our own story. We will not allow someone else to write, cast, and direct the story of our life. So this is the transition, the plot twist, where the storyline completely changes. Every main character has a history, and there's no change in that. But there's a time in the story where the character can change. Changing over a new leaf? Is that the right way to say it? I don't know. Sometimes my American phrases, But the main character gets to a point in their life where they know they have to change. We're going to write down how our main character, you, thinks. How do they perceive life? Because those thoughts will dictate their behavior, the actions that they take, the way they respond to stressful situations. how they deal with disappointment or loneliness. And then those actions and habits will outline the storyline, aka our happily ever after. I spent so many years just trying to change my thoughts, but now I realize that what I really needed to do is change my story, the blueprint of my life, or the inner workings of why I do the things that I do. And you'll be tested, and some tests are easier than others. And for those tough tests, you will feel overwhelmed, almost to the point where you're like, I don't even remember any of the coping mechanisms that I learned. All you have to do is remember the thing that gives you life, your breath. Take more of that in. Deep, slow breaths. Give yourself a hug or hold your own hands and remind yourself that you've been through it. You've been through lots of stuff and you move past it. There will always be tests in life, but you will come through it because you're strong, you are resilient, and you'll always be your biggest supporter. I won't let myself down, not anymore. And this story is where the main character is tested, but they will have the skills and the determination to get past this. See you in the next one. Bye.